This right here is the new GoPro Hero 10 Black, and pretty much the only way to tell the difference between this and the GoPro Hero 9 Black from last year is from this new GoPro logo in blue on the front and also the 10 Black on the side. Now, as a drone channel, of course, my main focus in today's video will be how does this camera fly on my FPV drone. I've been using the 9 Black ever since it came out, and it's been amazing for me. It's one of my favorite cameras ever, and it's literally that much better than anything else on the market. So my hopes were pretty high for the new 10 Black, and I think this will be my new favorite camera. Of course, it makes sense as it's newer, it has better processor, it has better specs, but yeah, we'll talk about all that in today's video. Visually, those two cameras are exactly the same, but the 10 Black, the newer one, is 5 grams lighter than the 9 Black, and luckily for all of us, all the accessories from the 9 Black also work on the 10 Black, meaning that also these Polar Pro ND filters work perfectly fine on the newer camera, and you can just simply swap them on the new one and they'll be working just fine. Inside the box, everything is exactly the same as the GoPro Hero 9 Black. So inside you have a cable, you have some of the basic GoPro accessories, some guides and startup information, and that's pretty much it. For me, one of the first things I was really excited to check out was the new frame rates and the new stabilization called Hypersmooth 4. The new frame rates being 5K 60 frames per second and 4K 120 frames per second, which is really impressive. And combine that with Hypersmooth 4, I was really excited to do my first flight. And of course, I picked the worst location possible. It was windy as hell and it was almost impossible to fly. And combine that with me doing my first ever flight with this new iFlight Chimera 7. It was my maiden flight on this drone. It was interesting to say the least. But stay tuned for that iFlight Chimera 7 review. It will come to the channel very soon. So the flying part. When I first started flying, everything was just insanely shaky because of that strong wind. Even inside my goggles, it was just like a hip-hop party. Everything was jumping up and down. It was really hard to fly. But for that, I think Hypersmooth 4 handled the wind, I would say, pretty well. Of course, it's not ideal. It has some jitterness, some just bumpiness left and right, and it has that hypersmooth look where when you do a turn, it kind of takes a second to realize where you're going, so it kind of misses a few frames and then it adjusts to that new spot where you're going, and for that it creates a little bit of a specific look that only this Hypersmooth stabilization has. So it's not ideal, it's not buttery smooth, it can never replace Reelsteady, of course. So for me, this Hypersmooth 4 would be great to use on a regular usage, which does not involve flying, or if you want to have a little bit of more realistic look. Sometimes you know, Reelsteady is a little bit fake looking with that distortion and being extra smooth. Sometimes when you're going for that raw real life look, you can use Hypersmooth 4, and that's exactly what I plan to do going forward with this camera. I do plan to use Hypersmooth every now and then, but for the most part I think Reelsteady can never be beaten. So I went to a Motocross Track to continue shooting. That's the same day, just after flying on that windy location. We went to this Motocross Track, and I think Hypersmooth performed a lot better over there because it was a little bit less windy, of course, but also check out how amazing the frame rates actually work when you shoot in 5K 60. You can crop and reframe a little bit, you can zoom in or zoom out, whatever you want to do, and of course you can slow down the footage. I didn't use 4K 120. For some reason I just completely blanked out and forgot to try that, but luckily I still managed to record some good footage, I think, in 5K 60. The 4K 120 is something that I will experiment with when it comes to FPV, but for my first ever tests of 4K 120, I was using it on the beach, so it's not really drone related, but I still managed to check it out, and I'm impressed by the bitrate and by the overall quality of this setting when you're shooting in 120 frames per second. It looks very, very impressive, but it definitely has its own place, and it's definitely going to come in handy in some situations where you really want to slow down the action and just focus on that activity. Yeah, it will be nice to have. One of the first things I noticed right off the bat when I turned on the camera is because of that new GP2 processor, everything is a lot smoother compared to the Hero 9. Everything is a lot faster and it just feels more responsive. So that's definitely something that made a nice impression to me. And I noticed some people are already complaining about some overheating issues with this camera, and I think they only come if you don't move the camera at all and if you shoot in the very high frame rates for a very long time. But in my tests, I didn't encounter anything like this. It was all smooth and working well. Well, something was not exactly as I expected. The battery was draining very quickly, and you have to know that if you plan to shoot in those high frame rates, the battery will drain very, very quickly. I mean, compared to previous cameras. So you have to be aware. Maybe you need to buy some extra batteries. That's something that I plan to do as well. But the good thing is that the battery of the Hero 9 also fits on the Hero 10. So if you have some of those, you can use them and you'll be good to go. The image quality, from what I've seen so far, I haven't tested the camera in that many different scenarios yet, but I would say it looks a little bit better than the 9. I don't know if it's placebo effect or it's really better than the 9, but I think it has a little bit more dynamic range. So together with the battery life, which is definitely not ideal, there is something else which I really don't like about this new camera, and that is the color profile selection. On this new camera, you have 3 different color profile options. You have flat, natural, and vibrant. And I do appreciate the different options that we have. It's just that the flat color profile is really not that flat. It's just slightly desaturated. So I would really love to have a really flat color profile, like a log profile on this GoPro, because right now it's just not ideal to color grade. And finally, when we talk about things that I don't like about this camera, we need to mention the price. The price of this camera is $500, and that's if you don't have the GoPro subscription. If you do decide to invest into the GoPro subscription, for 1 year, it will cost you $50. And with that, the price becomes $400. So $400 for the camera and $50 for the subscription means $450 for this camera, and then you'll have the chance to get a new camera if you break yours for a small fee, which I think is about $80. So you'll definitely have to take that into consideration. Every year, cameras are becoming more and more expensive, and it makes sense, but I just don't like that, so I have to mention it. So overall, would I recommend the GoPro Hero 10 Black for flying FPV? Yes and no. If you do have the Hero 9 Black and you use Reelsteady, the only major upgrade when you switch to the 10 would be to have 4K 60 in 4:3, so you can use that for Reelsteady, and you will have 2.7K in 120 frames per second. Other than that, I don't really feel like it's a massive upgrade if you have the 9, but if you have any other camera before that, yes, you should invest in the GoPro 10 because it's very, very good. It has a better processor with a lot more speed. It's a lot more smoother. It's more fluid. It has better image, or at least that's what they claim. I'll have to keep using the camera to let you know if that's really the case, in my opinion. And yeah, other than that, I think it's a great purchase, but it's a little bit more expensive than the previous one. So if you have a nice deal for a GoPro 9 Black, for example, it will be also a great option to invest into. But for me, I'm really interested to continue using this camera and check out all of its different features and different frame rates and different stabilization options. So stay tuned for more content with the GoPro Hero 10 Black coming on the channel very soon. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video if you have enjoyed it. This is Mike from Drone Supremacy. Take care everyone, and I'll see you very soon. Goodbye.